have a new little addition. How cute is he? Isn't he adorable? Oh my gosh. My mother-in-law gave me this when we went down to visit her, and just, oh, he's so cute, and he's going to live right behind my shoulder, right next to my little bulldog. We don't have a bulldog, but I want one. Hey guys, it's Sarah, and today we're going to do my July wrap-up. July was not the greatest reading month for me. It was lower than I've had like in the most recent months. We were traveling though. We went to my husband's 20th high school reunion, which was a blast. It was a lot of fun, and I actually knew a few people because I've met his friends over the years. So we had a really great time, but we were out of town for probably the span a total of about 10 days. And that did take a little bit of a toll on my reading. I didn't read quite as much as I was hoping, but that's okay. It's fine. And yeah, we are going to talk about what I did read. All right, so the first book that I finished in the month of July was The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. This is a book that I had checked out from the library, and I actually read it. Can you believe it? I went to the library, I got a book, and I read it. That never happens. I go and I get books, and then I have to take them all back because I don't have time to read them. But this one I was able to read. Okay. I still don't fully understand how I feel about this book. For the most part, I enjoyed it. When I initially reviewed it and gave it a rating, I gave it 4 stars. I'm going to leave it there for now. I could possibly lower it to a 3, honestly, because as more time has passed, I've kind of forgotten about it. And like, I'm sitting here trying to rack my brain, like, how did that even end? I don't even fully remember. So I know I didn't see the end coming. I didn't like figure anything out. So there is that. So I'm going to leave it at 4, but it definitely wasn't the greatest thriller I've ever read or one of my favorites by any means. It definitely felt like a very big nod to Stephen King's It. It has the dual timeline thing where there's a bunch of kids, you know, from the past, and they find a body and they're having to go through all these things, and like weird things are happening. They can't figure it out. And then it flashes forward to when they are adults, and then they're coming back together to try to figure out exactly what happened back then, because they don't fully still understand everything that's happening. So there is that. There's a girl that's part of it. She's a redhead, same as Stephen King's It, that type of thing. But yeah. So I gave it 4 stars, probably more like a 3, but I'm not going to change it. I don't change my ratings unless I reread books. So like, it's probably between a 3 and a 4 for me. So I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. It was definitely worth the read. And it's a short book, so you can get through it pretty quickly. But yep, that was the first one. You guys hear any licking? That's my parents' dog. He's staying with us for a few days, and he's underneath my feet, happy as can be, but he's also licking. I'm trying to get him to stop, but he's not completely listening to me. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about extremely briefly. I'm not going to give you my rating yet because this is part of my 5-star predictions that we're doing a follow-up here soon for Booklist Thursday, so stay tuned for that. But the one that I had on that list was The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. And this one I started actually, I think, over Memorial Day weekend, and I read a bit of it. I think I read about 100 pages of it, and then I put it down and read through a few other things, and then just took forever to get back to it. But once I picked it back up and said, okay, this is what I'm reading right now, I could not put it down. Yeah, so that's all I'm going to say, because I will go into detail about it when I do my 5-star follow-up. But this follows a true story. This is a nonfiction book. It follows a true story of Anne and her personal friendship with Ted Bundy. She knew him before he became notorious. They worked together and formed a friendship, and that friendship lasted all throughout him being known as one of the most awful serial killers in our time. So it was very, very interesting. I was fascinated by the whole thing. And yeah, I'll just go into more details in it coming up very soon, but I loved it. The next one that I picked up is a book that I read for a special project I did, where I read 3 books that I had been influenced to pick up from Kayla from Books and Lala, and I did a video about that where I read through 3 of them. So I'll leave that link down below if you guys haven't seen that one yet. But I picked up It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini, and this book was such a surprise 5-star read for me. I had no clue that I was going to love this book as much as I did. I could not put it down. I read it in 2 sittings, and I just was completely captivated by these characters and what they were going through. So this follows a young boy, and he is battling depression, and he has suicidal thoughts, and he ends up, coming up with a plan to kill himself. And the night that he plans to do it, he ends up reaching out for help, and he calls the Suicide Hotline. They tell him to go to the nearest emergency room and they can help him there. So he does that, and he gets admitted into the psychiatric ward of this hospital for a minimum of 5 days. That's kind of their minimum. If you check yourself in, you have to stay here for 5 days so we can observe you and make sure you're okay. And it's all about his experience there and the people that he meets and what he's going through all of this, both emotionally and, just being there and part of this environment. And it was fantastic. I really, really loved it. This is also very tightly based on the author's personal experience, doing something like that. Unfortunately, Ned Vizzini did lose his battle with depression, and he committed suicide in 2013. So that was really sad. Going into this knowing that already, that made it probably even more emotional of a read for me. Just knowing, that he actually experienced this, and then, the total outcome of that. But I loved it so much. It was so great. It was funny. I was laughing through some of it. Just the humor was really great. And it was kind of like a good little break from all the seriousness of it. And I thought it was fantastic. So 5 stars, loved it. Definitely want to read more from this author. The next book that I read was another library book, and that is Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. And this is the second book in I think it's called the Villains duology. And this one is the follow-up to Vicious, which I read recently as well and loved so much. And I wanted to read the sequel quickly. The sequel has just come out this year. And I buddy read this with Brianna, and we both really enjoyed this book. It was something that, it's a continuation. So I'm not going to give you too much of a premise because, I don't want to spoil anything. But I thought it was a good continuation. It picked up pretty much where the first book left off, and you kept going. You get introduced to some new characters, some of them that I really, really loved. And it was really action-packed. It took a little bit longer for me to connect with the newer characters, though, so that threw it off a little bit for me just because, I was not expecting a whole bunch of new characters. But once I was, in it and getting to know them, and I kind of knew what was going on with all of them, it kind of flew by for me after that. And I really ended up enjoying this one. I gave this like a 4.5, more of a 4, because it really, like I said, it was very action-packed, and I really liked the way that it ended, and I really didn't see a whole lot of what was coming. And it just wasn't quite Vicious for me. I liked Vicious more. So if you want to know what the whole thing encompasses, basically, it follows 2 men, Eli and Victor, and they meet in college, and they figure out a way to create extraordinary people. Think like, X-Men or superheroes or, something like that. Humans, but they have some sort of power, and they figure out how to actually create that in a human, and they use themselves as experiments, and they become almost super villains, I would say. Not necessarily superheroes. They're both pretty awful. But they both also feel like they are doing the world a favor, basically. And you follow what happens, and it's just, I loved it. So read them back to back. I highly encourage you to do that because, you're going to be with all the characters, and it was great. So I didn't love Vengeful as much as I loved Vicious, but I still really, really enjoyed them together as a whole. I thought it was great, especially with how much time has gone by between Vicious and Vengeful. I think she did a wonderful job kind of picking up the story and read and keep going and stuff like that. So definitely pick those up. All right, so the next one that I picked up is a book that has been recently adapted into a TV show, and it's been on my radar to read. My sister gave this to me for Christmas because it's one of her all-time favorite books. She's like top 3, and she's been bugging me to read this for years, and I finally did. And that is Good Omens, written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Now, okay, I loved this. This one is definitely a satirical book, and it follows an angel and a demon who have to team up because the apocalypse is happening, but the Antichrist is missing and they can't find the Antichrist. So it's mad chaos. Okay. If you've ever read Terry Pratchett, you will understand that this book is weird, but you just have to accept it and appreciate it for the weirdness that it is. There's weird things happening. There's weird creatures. It is also hilarious. I was laughing in the middle of the grocery store. Like, I was giggling the entire time because it was just so funny. And I was listening to it on audiobook. I mostly listened to this. I kind of flipped through a little bit as I was listening at some points, but the audiobook is fantastic. The narrator is really, really great. So I definitely recommend the audiobook if you are into those. You could also read this and still enjoy it just as much, but I was laughing so much. It was really, really funny. The names for like the 4 horsemen were so funny. They were hilarious. Yeah, so really, really great. I loved it. And I'm really excited to watch the TV show now. My sister has been watching the show and she's like, it's so good. Like, it's a really great adaptation of the book. So for this being one of her favorite books of all time, that she's really happy with the adaptation, makes me more excited to watch it now that I have read the book. But loved it. I gave it 4 stars because it did take me, you know, this is my first Terry Pratchett. It's not my first Neil Gaiman. I've read Neil Gaiman before. But it took me some time to get used to what was happening and the characters and the way it was told. So, but that's Terry Pratchett. So, I did give it a 4 just because it took me a little bit more to get into, but I loved it. The next book that I finished up is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. And I have a full reading vlog for this one up, so I will leave that link down below if you want to see it. I think it was actually one of my last videos that just went up. But book number 2 in the Throne of Glass series, loved it. It took me a little bit longer to get into this one than I remember from when I read it the first time. But once I was in it, I couldn't put it down, and I absolutely loved it. So I think probably like the second half of this book is really solid, and I just really enjoyed it a lot. So I did end up giving it 5 stars because it just, the way that it captured me in, even though it took halfway through the book, it was, you know, just, I went, oh yeah, that's why I gave this 5 stars the first time around. Second time around was also 5 stars. So loved it. Okay. The last one, I'm not going to say much. I'm going to go into it more into detail again with my 5-star prediction follow-up type thing, because this was part of that as well. But I read Badger by C.M. McKenna. And I'm going to have a hard time finding words for this book. I'm going to have a hard time finding words because I don't feel like it's something that I should publicly recommend. And if you've read it, you know why. You know why. There's a lot of disturbing things in this book. Like a lot of disturbing things. Did I love it? Yeah. Yeah, I did. I loved it. But I also don't want to be the one responsible for putting this into people's brains. So I don't know what to say about that. It's hard. I will go into more details about like kind of what's in here versus, you know, a general synopsis, but yeah, so I'm going to save it for my video coming up here in the next couple days. But yeah, but I read it. Okay, guys, that is it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. I have a couple on the go right now, and then I have some big plans for August. So let me know down below if you have read any of these books. Let me know what some of your thoughts were. Try to keep it spoiler-free in the comments as well in case anyone else is reading. And let me know what you read in July. What was your favorite book? Least favorite? Did you have any surprises, any disappointments, all that good stuff? And I will talk to you guys again soon. Hope you have a great day. Bye.